Hello, people of the internet. Steve Persch here, Director of Developer Relations at Pantheon, calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, on these live streams, we often get deep into the weeds of website operations, HTTP headers, the latest and greatest features of the next version of WordPress, and more. And sometimes, though, we need to bring it down to basics. Often, we at Pantheon, especially me and my developer relations role, we just got to talk about the path that any given code change takes from a developer's laptop to the live website. Now, for some teams, that path from the laptop to the live website can involve complex continuous integration workflows, automated tests, multiple approvals. Though for some developers, myself included, we got started by sending code straight from our laptops to live environments, perhaps while sipping coffee out of a mug that says YOLO or something. It was not a great way to work, and of course, we learned how to professionalize those practices. At Pantheon, perhaps our most central feature is that all WordPress and Drupal sites get at least 3 environments: dev, test, and live. And if you want, you can have multi-dev environments too. That product choice that we make, 3 environments for every site, is a DevOps sort of decision that generally makes Pantheon better for the web teams using it. Now, while Pantheon has always existed to run content management systems, WordPress and Drupal, we haven't been nearly as specific in providing a unique answer to the question, how does the content get from the laptops of content editors to the live website? Yes, WordPress and Drupal store and manage content, but how does the content get there? Are there automated processes, or is it just copy, paste, and publish while drinking coffee from a mug that says YOLO? Now, today we are going to get into some specifics. I am joined here by 2 leaders from the Pantheon product team, Chris Yates and Roland Benedetti, who have been around the block in the world of website operations. Chris, for those who have not met you previously, could you take a moment and introduce your background and your role at Pantheon?
Sure. So I'm Chris. I'm the VP of Product at Pantheon, and what that means is, I'm serving the product team who interface with our customers, with our internal team that are working with our customers and our partners day in, day out to figure out what's next and how to build that. So we're looking at all the challenges, the problems that teams encounter, building for the web, not just the getting things live and running them at a high performance, but the workflows that surround that. So Steve, you mentioned the developer workflow, where we focused a ton on in the history of Pantheon, but that's just one of the groups that come together to build and manage websites. So websites are built by developers, but they're also built by people creating the content, people creating the design, people run, that are ultimately responsible for the business outcomes. So the folks, call them marketers, editors, whatever those people are in their that a particular business. So I've, by way of introduction, I've been in and around the web CMS space and building for the web for almost 30 years. Doing a lot of that in the open source world, been in the Drupal community for a really long time. But I've also had lots of different roles. I've been, in the media industry and then in government and worked at a NASA lab for a little bit. But I've also run marketing at a company before in the B2B SaaS space. So, we have a lot of exposure to these challenges that customers have, not just, getting the thing live and keeping it running well, but also how do all those teams interact? So those are one of the things that we've been exploring a ton of recently, and we're kind of excited to talk about today.
Yeah, and Roland, I know you have been particularly focused on this world of content publishing. Could you introduce yourself for a moment and your perspective on the process for publishing content?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Steve, for having us. I basically work in Chris' team, so I won't repeat a lot of the mission, but I do have a focus, which is leading part of the product team building for this, user persona, which is the content creator. So that's where my focus is, looking at how we better solve the problem of those contributors of the web team. And we will talk a lot about that. I joined actually specifically for that. I really worked my career 25, 30 years, something in between, I guess, in the same space as Chris, around web content management, starting in very old proprietary systems, and at the very beginning of the 2000s, starting to move into open source systems and seeing the value of embracing open source and embracing more like collaborative ways of building software, and moving a lot of actually content publishers like magazine and news companies in France and in Europe in general. Mm-hmm. So that's my background, basically.
Yeah, and Roland, I know you've got an exciting demo to show us here. Say the word, and I'll, if you're ready, I'll bring up the screen share here.
Yeah, I'm absolutely ready whenever you want.
You mentioned magazine publishing. Early in my career, I reached out to a college friend to ask. She was working at magazines. How do you actually get an article to your live website? And she described for me the on-paper process of marking things up with pen and her physically passing a sheet of paper around from editor to editor and then resolving those. So for some teams, it has gotten more digital than that, but there has always been a labor-intensive editing process that exists often outside of the CMS, even though Drupal and WordPress have existed for 20-ish years. Mm-hmm. The process of getting a piece of content, even a simple blog post ready to be published, begins well before Drupal or WordPress are in the picture. So could you tell us about what we're looking at here?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and you bring news and magazine. That's fantastic. I remember, actually, just a sidetrack, I remember building automation for Quark Express to the web. So that was actually challenging. So what we're focusing here is not at all magazine publishing, although it could totally apply, but it's quite generic in terms of use case. And we're looking at people using Google Docs for creating stories. And actually, I'm sure a lot of people in the magazine industry are using Google Docs, but this applies to any editorial text-heavy content, of course, in the media industry, but also any industry which deals with that, and of course academics, education, documentation of any kind that can be interesting. What we're looking at is how we can bridge basically Google Docs and the website and make this easier. So before talking about that, maybe the best is just to show you, right? So
yes.
So we are in a Google Doc here, and that's typically where collaboration happens now. And Google has to be, like, we have to recognize they did an amazing job at really providing a fantastic collaborative tool for people to not only just write, but also comment, collaborate, work together. And I don't have a lot here because that's just a demo application. So I'm working on this piece. And I will start to think about publishing this on the web, on my website. So from the get-go, I wanted this article to be written for the web. Could be used for something else. And we basically build a solution that streamline and facilitate this, that allows to speed up, but also to provide more control, because without that, the process is manual. It's basically copy-paste. So it all starts with an add-on to Google Docs that you need to install to your Google Docs, and I will just open it. And when you have this add-on installed, you can basically enrich your experience in Google Doc with additional capabilities, which are all accessed from this sidebar on the right. So now I'm working on that content. That content is obviously not ready for being published. As you can see, there's a couple of things in there. But I think very early on, editors want to know how content will look like on the web. And that's maybe a lesson headless CMSs it took a long time for them to get, but total separation of concern is difficult. When you write, you like to write for someone, and you like to know what they will see, basically. So the first thing I want to show you is how we can use this solution to help make this a reality, and have a direct real-time preview of the content you're working on. I will place my windows side by side so that you can see that. So I'm working in my Google Doc, but I just hit the preview here, and I have on this right window basically a preview of the content on the web, exactly how it will look like when it is published. It is not published. This is actually a real-time communication between the website layer and Google Docs through our service, but it's not available for anonymous visitors. But I can use it to have an idea of how it looks like. And you can see, for instance, that the title here is not correct. Actually, previously, I have just suggested this title. Let me get rid of this. So I will just accept this title, and automatically my title will be updated. I have some content which are some illustration missing. I had some comment here, so I can go dig on my desktop some images that I will find here. This is a good one. I guess we've been working on some visuals. So, okay, I will approve this. This is getting published on the right, and I can, and so on and so forth. I can basically build up my content and have a real-time view on, how it looks like on the web, right? So that's the first one of the many things we solved, but a very important one, giving creators like editors a clear way to see how content will be rendered.
That is very slick, Roland. That is impressive.
I can see that Chris is messing with my document, actually.
Oh, the magic of collaborative editing. So yeah, when Roland, you were in suggestion mode, the suggested text was not populated over to the preview version of the website until you hit accept. But Chris here in the editing mode of the Google Doc is editing, and those changes are functionally immediately appearing on the Next.js side. That is impressive.
Exactly. Like, suggestions or comments, they are things that belong to the creation process. Actually, this is a good illustration. The way we see, and I think the way the process of putting content on the web is really 3 tiers. There's the creation process where really you collaborate on creating content. There's the production process that you might want to call post-production if you want, but that's where you might want to make sure you have the right image that goes with the content. You might want to make sure your meta are right for SEO purposes. You might want to make sure that facts have been checked by someone if you are in a regulated environment, and basically assemble content with additional things. And then you have the delivery side, which is the website itself. Comments, suggestions, they belong to creation. They don't go through. If you don't use suggestions but direct editing, anybody can directly edit, and it's kind of magical because everybody can have a real-time preview of how it will look like on the web.
Yeah. So I've got I have a printed out version of that same diagram, and on these streams I love to simplify things down to crayons and Legos and simple diagrams when possible. So I think what we just saw there, Roland, you're over here working in the Google Doc on your laptop. I don't know if we saw this part yet, but if someone were, if we were working on a published site, not just one that was unpublished, someone viewing that website on their phone could be seeing those changes near instantly. And I think someone implied there are perhaps stakeholders involved who just want to see what it's going to look like on the website. And historically, there has been an endless number of points of friction in between we're creating a piece of content, we're doing the production steps, and we're getting it out to the people who are reviewing it. As Pantheon has been working on this capability, I've sometimes scratched my head and thought, to what degree do we need unique answers here? Because Drupal and WordPress on this side of the diagram have some answers to some of these questions, but as as we've been talking about this more internally and developing this functionality, I've had to to just think through the fact that what you just demoed is a smooth path from Google Doc to live website, and even for teams not using something like this, there's kind of a dotted, messy, maybe crooked line that goes from Google Doc to live website. Copy pasting happens, mistakes get made, and there's a lot of opportunity for simplifying like a route that has to be traveled one way or another. Roland, to what degree do you see this approach as a net new thing? To what degree is this a simplification, a streamlining of what people were doing anyway?
So to answer that first, I want to say that we just saw like the preview real time, but the production layer is also here to possibly gate if you want to gate content, so that obviously in many cases you want to have control on safety, and that's very important. The demo for real-time preview, of course, shows real-time rendering on the website. Now I still have a publish step that I need to go through. That's not answering your question. I just wanted to add this. To answer your question, yes. I think what's new in that approach, what's really new is that we take an approach which is team and collaboration centric and not system of records centric. Like content publisher is not a CMS in that regard. The goal of content publisher is to let users use the tool of choice for what they have to do. And we started with Google Docs, but we have a roadmap and we have ideas. And I could myself foresee that if you think we could have the same thing for Figma and a couple of other tools, you could end up having a very complex website totally driven with that idea of content is being created in Google Docs, Figma, and maybe a few others in the DAM for the media, and never get the business users in the CMS itself. The CMS being in charge of many other things, though, being in charge of composing layout, applying the design system, which is very important. In the demo I showed, content publisher is not taking charge of the design system. Content publisher is taking charge of actually sanitizing content so that it embraces the design system which has been set up on the website. And that's something that is specific to CMS, web CMS, and that's not the goal of content publisher. So I think this is a new approach versus the CMS, which was an approach people will work in the CMS. The approach of content publisher is we connect the tools and we try to streamline how those tools can work together to get to the end result of a web page made of content. Yeah.
All right, I do want to see more and more here, Roland. This is exciting tech. But Chris, as I switch out our various screen shares here, I'm curious, Chris, how you think about the composition of these different elements and pieces of technology.
Yeah, I think Roland's exactly right in that we have these kind of workflows around the creation of stuff, whether that's the creation of design in tools that have emerged like Figma and others, or the creation of the content that may exist in Google Docs, or even the creation of code that is largely moved to tools like GitHub and GitLab. They're not, it's like we do stuff and then it ends up on the web. And then for every change that we have to make, because the web is a live medium, unlike where I started and Roland worked too, in getting Quark Express and InDesign stuff out into printed pages. These are live documents. We should be able to update them. So in that process, it's not just publishing once, but what do I do when I need to make an update? What if I want to make corrections? What if I want to improve things? We have to kind of go back through, find where the content originated, go figure out how to get back through that convoluted process. Sometimes it's literally emailing and copy pasting information from one place to another. So I think the CMSs like Drupal, like WordPress, frameworks like Next.js, all play a role in creating the scaffolding around how that information should be presented. They have a huge role to play, but then we've been missing this kind of like this connective tissue between the people and the work they're doing to the end product that gets delivered.
Mm-hmm. Chris, everything you said sounded excellent, but I may have been a little distracted because I think I just saw Roland paste a table from a Google sheet into a Google Doc, and then it appeared in Next.js. And tables in particular are particularly tricky. For some reason, 30 years into the web, tables are still tricky.
Yeah, this was just to insist a little bit on the case that in our approach, one of the original ideas that people want to stay in their tool of choice, and that there are tools that you will have a hard time like providing just as good. So I know that collaboration in the CMS is something that people are working on. Myself, I worked for 15 years for a CMS vendor, and we were trying to make collaboration happen in the CMS, but there are things that you will probably never reach in terms of productivity and like appeal. Like this is just Google Docs. I'm not demoing Content Publisher, I'm demoing Google Doc. I take some data from a spreadsheet in Google Workspace. This spreadsheet is actually pulling data from a feed. So it's not even on the spreadsheet, it's just loaded. And if you do like news coverage, you can basically just click update and you get an update. Then you decide to paste this. You can take the chart that Google Sheet is generating, and you can just paste it here as well because it looks better than the table itself. You can keep it linked. And that's something that, I don't think we will ever reach that level of collaboration in a CMS. We should, of course, advance the capability of the CMS, but our point of view is that these tools are like really where collaboration and works happen, and we want to connect them. So in the case of the table or the graphic or the content, we still want to govern how content goes to the web. Another thing that I didn't show, but it's obviously, you get plenty of content creators who have, sorry to say, but really bad taste, and they would do things such as, I don't know, they would use lobster.
I like lobster. I remember when Google Fonts came out and lobster was cool.
So you don't want that on your Pantheon website, and I don't think my leadership would be happy if I would push this live.
Probably not. Okay, so
the tool allows to also sanitize this somehow in a way which is interesting. Yeah. And the next step is go ahead.
We do have a question from Chris that I put up on the screen, but I want to ask a follow-up here on the lobster part. So we're stripping out the lobster font. I can also imagine a design leader saying, I do not like these colors in this chart. Okay, so colors in the text are getting stripped out. What about colors in the Google chart there?
No, chart are managed and taken care as images. So I agree to you to some extent. This could be something some people want to align with a specific brand or a specific palette. And you could imagine that down the road, because there's a part of the solution we're building which is based on Gen AI, you could actually imagine that this could be fairly easily tweaked by an artificial intelligence, knowing your brand specifics. So I really think it's doable, but that's not really where we focus because we think usually images, you will actually focus more on like choosing the right image more yet than just transforming it.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And so Chris Reynolds in the chat here was asking, can you speak to the use case of content publisher versus built in the CMS page builders like Elementor, Gutenberg? You could throw in on the Drupal side of things, the layout builder module in Drupal. There are plenty of people in the Drupal community build up complex layouts around the paragraphs ecosystem of modules.
I mean, I can definitely. I'm sure Chris can as well. I think it's very much in line with what I started. I think both routes are to be explored and to be advanced. I mean, that's the beauty of open source. You always look into all directions and you're progressing on all fronts, which is great. The rationale behind Content Publisher is that we ask our customers, where do they work? And 90% of them, and I'm not talking about the dev side, like I'm talking about the content side, the editorial side. 90% of them are crafting content in Google Docs. So there are some users who spend their life in the CMS and who are very happy with their CMS, but it's really rare. We have to admit this, and it's something that we have not solved in 30 years of history of CMS. Most of business users who are not dedicated to that task of loading content on the website and who have another job, which is be it an educator, a journalist, or whatever, they actually don't like the CMS. It's just a fact. Like, even if we make the best CMS ever, they will not embrace it as they embrace a tool like Google Doc, in my opinion. So we are serving those, and which are actually not a small segment. They are a big segment of the editorial persona. And there will be room for people who spend their life in the CMS, because that's their day-to-day, for sure. Yeah.
So I would add, I kind of think about it in the way that I did when I was actually, running a marketing team, where, we had, a few different websites that we were running, but even within a single website, we had lots of different things that we were trying to do. We had, and you had different tools that would be most appropriate for different sections of the website. So, in the way that, in a kind of a circular way, we've gone from 25 years ago, where you had a front end and a back end, and then we had these big monolithic CMSs that did everything, like Drupal, WordPress, and commercial options. And then we kind of got back to this decoupled or headless thing, where it's like you've got the thing built maybe in React or something on the front end, and then a CMS behind it. I kind of look at it more as a composite, where there are different parts of your website that you probably want to work on differently and use different tools. So, Chris asked about tools like Elementor and Gutenberg. Back in the day, we had panels and other things in Drupal too. And I think these all kind of coexist with what we're building in Content Publisher, because there are things that you want to spend time kind of crafting and having very complex layouts. Sometimes you want to give your team the ability to kind of WYSIWYG all that stuff together. Maybe it's for a landing page, or it's for your home page or something like that. And then there are things that you probably code to the nth degree. You will, the pricing page has all sorts of interactions and pop up little tool tips and things like that you will handcraft in code. But then there's a swath of things, whether it's your blog, or it's your kind of your About Us section, or it's how do I get somebody in my local water department to be able to update the website on when they're going to be working on the mains or whatever, or what the holiday schedule for service is, and that sort of thing. There's a whole swath of kind of use cases within that single website that we can address with tools like this that plug in this long form content. There's going to be some overlap, and I think one of the things that, if we have time, Roland can show is the notion of how we support components in this model of you can use stuff that's kind of fielded data that maybe if we get into the geekier side, it could be a React component, it could be a Drupal single directory component. It's data that exists kind of in this free-form content, so to speak. So there is some overlap, but I think more than that, these are complementary technologies, and we view this as a tool in the toolkit that web teams will use.
Yeah, and Roland, can you describe this tool in the toolkit that you just brought up here? So I think I saw you right click, you clicked on an integration, and what are we looking at now?
Oh, look at that, Steve Persch.
Oh, hey, I recognize that guy.
No, I was just as Chris was mentioning this. Yeah, there are things it's very composite, I think, and I think one of the problems is CMSs have been looking at things in a very binary ways. There's the website and there's the article, but actually it's more complex than that. So let's say you work for instance, product reviews, marketing product reviews. That's very editorial, that's long form. Typically using Google Docs for that is great. You might want to have cards with the product, and you don't want to manage this content. You want to pull this content from somewhere. That's the type of things you can do with components. So here I'm basically inserting inline in the flow of my document. I'm inserting what we call a smart component, which will be a React component on the next which I didn't put any image, so I would need to put my superb product and put an image, but I don't have an image here, so you get the point. I'm basically probably I don't know if I need the and I'm basically your component still has unchanged place. Yeah, that's okay. So we let the editorial team have the ability to use components that are actually existing on the website. This is a React component or an SDC component if it's a Drupal website. And the user placing it in the flow of the document, the component is rendered as what we call a smart chip in the Google Doc world. So this is the way, and you can at any time preview this or change this or refer to external data. So you could, imagine plenty of use cases where this is used. This is a product insert. It could be a form insert. So if on this website, I just have, I have a lead capture. You want to place a lead capture in the flow of your story. You can just use this, and this will be properly managed. It doesn't, the copy is not managed in Google Docs because that's not what you want. You're just basically inserting this. So that's the component thing. And it should show, by the way, here. Yeah, you can see my...
Great. Yeah, what you're showing here stands out to me in the way it can expand the pool of people within a company or an organization who can understand how all the elements on the page got there. And that's a pain point I have seen in my 2 decades in the Drupal and WordPress community, that even for our own website built in Drupal, there are the people who built Pantheon.io and who know how all the pieces get there. And there's kind of a gradation from people who know how to post blog posts, people who know how to do the more complex layout building, but there's a difficult learning curve in even a member of our own company looking at any given page on our own website and asking and answering, how did all of these elements on this page get here? And this, to borrow a phrase from the WordPress community, kind of democratizes publishing by using the interface of Google Docs. It seems like we're expanding the pool of people who have a stake in the content of any given web page, who could actually understand how that content got there.
Yeah.
What's really exciting to me is that it's not just democratizing it. So it is giving more people access to be able to do these things, but it really kind of lives up to one of the core tenets of what Pantheon believes in, which is governance. So, as opposed to a pure WYSIWYG thing where you can just drop anything and drag how the layout is going to be presented around, etc. It does put some guardrails in place to make sure that things are consistent, they're accessible, and well structured at the same time. So we're trying to have this kind of best of both worlds sort of approach.
Speaking of well structured, Roland, we didn't even plan that transition. It looks like you're structuring where this content.
Yeah, no, I was listening to Chris. I wanted to show.
What are we looking at now?
So now we are looking at publishing. I mean, I could decide to really publish this. For now, I was just collaborating. If I want to publish it, I might have additional things, and that's usually each time I would speak to someone who has been working the CMS world for a long time, they are like, well, but that it's not just about the story. There's all the meta that needs to live around that. There's the SEO optimization. There's the approval. Where does it fit in the navigation? Where does it fit on the website? So now I'm basically publishing this content. That's where I can choose where it fits. So on that playground demo, I have just sections, and I'm publishing this as part of the text section because it's supposed to be a review of web CMS. And I could decide to publish it somewhere else. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but and there's a last step before really publishing in that case, which is making sure my meta are good. And I wanted to touch on that because it's very important. The meta that you see in that very specific example, like you can see title, slug, description, those are always here because they are standard web things. But then you have additional meta that are actually, that don't pay attention, because these don't mean anything. They are just for the sake of showing you can change your schema. So you will actually here embrace the way you structure your content on your website, and you will fit this with what you want in your CMS maybe. So if you think about WordPress will take either the tags, or basically, which is an open list of keywords, or will text a closed list of categories, and will use this to post the content in the right category in WordPress. You can do whatever you want with Meta. You can actually you can define your own schema with all the field types you want, files, binary, numbers, and you can use this on the CMS. This is up to the developers, not really anymore the matter of the content user, but there's this phase. And this phase, we think, takes a lot of time and can be accelerated by a lot. And that's where we started to use Gen AI to accelerate this phase. So actually, I already populated some of those meta, but if I had done an empty new piece of content, all the fields would be empty. But you can see that the system is suggesting some values for this, for the title, for the slug, for the description. This is very often the one that takes the most time for SEO. And here we are just suggesting some descriptions which have been generated by an LLM. And LLM are not good at creativity, but they are good actually at condensing and summarizing things. So if you have a long form piece of content, LLM will be fairly good at giving you a 200 character summary of that. And that's what we do basically.
This reminds me of some advice that I got at WordCamp US this year from Alex Denning, a prominent member of the WordPress community, we were chatting about LLMs, and you can see a portion of this on our YouTube page. Alex was saying that while some people are looking at LLMs and thinking like, oh, this could do my whole job for me, and that's either exciting or scary, he was saying like, scope it down to specific tasks. It's more productive to ask, how can LLMs help me with these specific tasks in the process, rather than how are LLMs going to take over the whole process. So that reminds me, I think of that here, because like the specific task of producing the most effective description or title or these other SEO type of fields, yeah, LLMs might be better than humans at this specific task. And I am more comfortable, as we're doing here, letting an LLM make multiple suggestions. A human then reviews the reviews these suggestions, accepts one, puts it in, keeps a human in the loop. That to me seems like a reasonable usage of LLMs in the content publishing workflow for the time being.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Same thing in the development side of things. Like copilots are still supposed to help developers work better, but I think, again, that's my personal stance. I don't know, but when it comes to coding or to creating content, there's creativity involved, and they will never actually have that, in my opinion, that creativity. We can push the needle, but we want here the organization and the user to be in control for sure. One area which I cannot demo right now, but we are working on, is typically how you enrich with images. So we could demo with generating images, but actually I think where this has a lot of power is once it's plugged on your DAM system or on your Google Drive with plenty of images, you can very quickly go pick 10 images that you suggest to the editor, and the editor click on what he wants to use as illustration for a story. And depending on the content, this might be critical or not, but in many cases, this takes much more time than what it should take. And when you're done, you can basically publish, and then you can be live, basically. And then now, if I go there, that's my real content. And the right is still the real-time preview, and the left is something published on our playground.
This is all very exciting. I keep mentally falling down like, oh, what more could we do with this? But Chris Reynolds here again in the chat has a more specific question. How is alt text for images handled?
Well, actually, that's also something LLMs are quite good to, generating an alt and putting it in your image. Actually, Google Docs also, but so we will basically carry the alt text, and you will have to have your CMS or your next application able to display it. But clearly, accessibility is super important, so you need alt, and you can generate them automatically or not. So that's the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you might have just been partly asking, like, do you right click on the on the image in the Google Doc and set alt text? Or what?
Actually, you don't. You can do this on the main thumbnail that they introduced. I forgot what it is,
okay.
but that's really new. That's for the main image of the piece. But for here, you can't actually. That's the right thing. Or can you? Yeah, we can. Sorry, actually, I'm wrong.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, you go.
Alt text right there.
So this is Google Docs, and I'm not actually a user myself. I should do this more often. I learned something. Thank you, Chris. And we are moving this over. Yeah.
So we're 42 minutes into our stream. I feel like we could keep going here for I don't know how long. Roland, are there other areas of functionality you really want to show off before we wrap up?
No, I mean, we could show much more. That's clear, but I don't think we need to. I think we can maybe more like discuss the long term, like the vision. Maybe Chris has to add to that, but I think one thing I like to discuss is the workflow and the assessment, or like the only status quo in the content management side is that we didn't get to really get a workflow that works well because of breaking the source of truth for content. So if you go on, the only thing I will show is, for instance, this one. This is a WordPress piece of content. It's a copy, you can see, but no matter what, this is happening in WordPress, and this is posting the content into WordPress. I use a 2011 theme. Content is living in WordPress and is being basically posted as entities in the WordPress database. But the thing which is essential is that even if you have power admins who are better in WordPress than in Google Docs, you give them the option not to break the source of truth by editing in Google Docs. And I think this is essential. This is, if I go there, I basically go there and can make a new revision and post again. This is very important, and this is something in the dev side of things we got totally right. I remember when I started my career, version control was terrible, but now when you look at GitHub, GitLab, and how teams are just flying through the process of creating and collaborating and merging and pushing things out, nothing like this happened in the world of content. And I think what we are after is trying to bring something, a little bit of that, like significant, substantial gain of productivity and efficiency.
Yes, for a while, a decade ago or so, I was extremely bullish on just using exactly the same stuff for content. Like, let's put all of our content on GitHub. I think I spent New Year's Eve one night before going out to a party. I made a typo correction on Jeff Eaton's blog post. And then I went to my New Year's Eve party because his blog post was entirely on GitHub. And I'm like, this is amazing. GitHub workflows, but for content. And like, here we are a decade later, and content is drafted in Google Docs, not in GitHub.
Yeah, I actually did the same thing when, so I was running a marketing team, and our CMS was GitLab. And that was great for developers. We love that. I'm a nerd, so that was wonderful. Because we could do the things that the business was asking of us. It was like, it's not just like do one thing, it's like do a dozen things. Like, I got to launch campaigns, I got to create landing pages, I got to improve SEO, I got to work on a site-wide redesign, I got to work on a product launch, which has a dozen different things that need to change. And I need to do all that at once. And Git is awesome for that. But you know who really didn't like that? everybody else in the team. Like nobody wanted to, so we're still back at copy paste. Okay, I'll work, tell me when it's updated and I'll paste it over there. So this is,
yes.
this is like the leading edge of that solution. I think our vision is to extend that and be able to solve that problem more broadly. So I can say like, I'm going to do a product launch, like, like this sort of thing. But I have to, multiple pages that need to be coordinated. I need to build, things to capture interest in information. I need to, build, landing pages for social. I need to update documentation. Like we want to approach kind of the melding of content and code in the same way that, developers use Pantheon today. To see what their stuff is going to look like, to make sure it's perfect, and then be able to launch it one time. So that's where we're going. And answer Chris's question directly. Yep, all that is magically handled. Like you can mouse, you can set the title, you can set the alt text, and it just kind of works. We emit that into the markup that the end user sees.
Yeah, and we were getting somewhat into the big picture there, so I wanted to bring back the crayon diagram. So we've got this overview of content publishing running through Content Publisher, and this diagram reminded me a bit of our classic Pantheon deployment workflow diagram. For a decade we've been talking about how all sites on Pantheon have code that moves from dev to test to live, and isn't that great for the developers? But we've just said like, oh yeah, and content gets updated in the live environment, and then you copy the database down to dev, and neither we nor the rest of the DevOps world have addressed much about how does the content get to the live site, and that's why we're working on this, because as we have thrown around the word web ops a lot in the last 5 years, we see web ops. How do you operate your website? The operation of a website involves a lot of people, and it involves the intersection of a lot of different areas. You do need code, you do need content, and there's design input. And Pantheon historically has, our product surface area has spoken much more to the concerns of the developer. And yes, content does end up in the content management system. And yes, designs do get implemented in CSS and HTML and JavaScript, and those end up being codified in code and distributed through Git and all that. But there is a lot more potential for uniting these disciplines in a way that is coherent, that Chris can get us back to that world where like, oh yes, we could just do a product launch, or the Super Bowl scenario where a whole bunch of web pages around a journalism site need to update the instant the Super Bowl ends and the winner is known. That is still way too darn hard because it involves syncing changes among these different disciplines.
And it's even harder to roll back to governance.
Yes. 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 All right. Well, I'm excited. Can we were mentioning this, but before the call, I have the Gutenberg module installed on my own Drupal site because in the 9 years I've been at Pantheon, I have Frankensteined my own website in lots of different ways. Can I just put Google Docs this Content Publisher Google Docs integration on my own live website now?
I mean, if it's not Drupal 7, I don't know which one you run.
Yeah, but right now we're more looking for testing, and we'll have more to share about when this is ready for production usage.
The answer is coming soon. So this is a sneak preview. We're looking to launch this as a private beta, and we'll have information on how to get involved in that on pantheon.io and on our social channels. And we'll want your feedback and interest when we're ready to launch that. But we hope this has been a cool sneak preview, and I am also super excited about the potential here.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris and Roland, for the sneak peek here. My interest is peaked. I hope yours is as well, viewers live and our later viewers. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Pantheon live stream, and we will see you on the internet. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.